Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly video roundtable discussion show where we discuss all things fire service related. Firefighting Today is a production of PeteLamb.com. And now your host, Chief Peter Lamb.
Hello and welcome. It's Peter Lamb. I'm your host for tonight's roundtable. We're talking about some fire service and life advice. That's what we're doing, fire service and life advice tonight. So we've got a couple of little logistical things before we get started here, and that is this. If you are watching us live on YouTube, if you go to the YouTube page and use the YouTube live chat, you can interact directly with the panel. That's a good way to get in touch with us. The second thing is, if you are watching us live and you want to use a tweet, if you tweet at Pete Lamb, we'll be able to interact with you that way as well. So I'm your host of the Firefighter Training Podcast and the PeteLamb.com webpage. So you can feel free to contact us that way. We'll do a quick introduction on the panel and then we'll get started. Chief Pernesti, say hello to the audience tonight.
Hello, I'm Joe Pernesti. I'm an assistant fire chief, City of Elyria, Ohio Fire near Cleveland. Got about 29 years on the job. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, thank you, Chief. I appreciate you. Chief Hines, say hello, please.
Hey, everyone. George Hines, Deputy Fire Chief, Grand Canyon National Park. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Pete.
Okay. Chief Cagno, say hello.
Chief John Cagno, Battalion Chief, North Providence, retired and founder of Lead It, and thanks for having me again, Chief.
All right. Captain DeVito, great to have you with us. You're not a regular on the panel, but we're going to drag you in, kicking and screaming. We'll get you in here. So, Captain, tell the folks a little bit about you.
Honored to be here, Chief. My name is Joe DeVito. I'm a captain in Southwest Florida. Been a captain now for about 2 years, and I'm still learning the ropes. So thank you for having me.
Great. Great to have you. Chief Burns, say hello. Quick intro.
Hi, Chief and everyone. Kevin Burns, just recently retired as a deputy chief from the Framingham Fire Department, which is up here in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. Thank you for having me, Chief.
Not a problem. Lane, say hello. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. Lane Woolery, Battalion Chief with San Diego City Fire Rescue.
Thanks for being here, Lane. I appreciate it. And last but certainly never least, Chief Whitley.
Hi guys, Warren Whitley, retired assistant chief from Prince William County, Virginia, outside of DC, and I also play.
I lost the tail end of that, Warren. Say again.
I also am involved with Kill the Flashover.
Okay, thank you. So our purpose here tonight, we got a couple of bajillion years of fire service experience. All right, maybe that was an exaggeration, but we got a bunch of fire service experience here on the board. And I think at different points in our career and different points in our life, somebody has said something, and maybe it was off, maybe it was a life lesson that you can apply to the fire service, or maybe it was a fire service lesson that you can apply to life. So we're kind of going to just we'll reach out to people and talk about it, and then if somebody throws something out there and it warrants discussion, let's talk about it a little bit after we throw out the advice. So Warren, why don't you lead us off? What's a piece of advice you have or you were given?
Well, one I was given that I'll pass on is continue your education. My first chief, I think, was a bit of a visionary about formal education for fire officers and seeing the gradual professionalization of the services. So he encouraged me to go back to school since I had flunked out and then went to work for the fire service. So I'm almost still going. But 5 degrees later, I took a break.
Yeah, 5 degrees. There is a time you might want to stop somewhere along the way, Warren, but no, that's great advice. If we have any younger members, even senior members, continue your education. There's not enough to be said for that. And you know, whether that, and Warren's speaking specifically of higher education, certainly, but even in terms of training sessions, vocational stuff, certifications, all of those things, you know, education is something that nobody can take from you unless you give it to them. It's kind of an interesting thing, right? Nobody can steal your education. So it's kind of a good, a good thing about that. So that's a good thing. Kevin, you want to respond to that?
Yes, Chief, I agree wholeheartedly with Chief Whitley. I would just say specifically with regards to fire stuff, make that effort to get outside your own department. To go to your fire academy, spend some dough and go to Firehouse, go down and see the killer flashover guys, go to the FDIC. Boy, it's invaluable to get others' perspectives and bring that knowledge back. And with that, Chief, I would just add, have that mentor outside the fire department, somebody you can go to, maybe unload some gripes and get some honest feedback. So I think it's key to have that outside the department contact for both education and a mentor.
Yeah, you know, we should probably do a whole session on mentoring, because I think it's a word that's thrown around a lot, but it is, I'm not sure everyone understands it to the same level. So that, you know what, that's a good topic for another session for sure. Captain DeVito, what do you got?
Just to add to what was earlier said about the mentoring, sometimes you made a good point that you need to find people outside your department to talk to, because people inside your department sometimes will not really see things the way you will, or maybe turn it around and play it against you. And we have a great support group called the Firehouse Kitchen Table, where we have the ability to talk to many people throughout the United States and get different input from different areas. And it definitely helps you focus on what's right, what's important.
Yeah, good point. And that's they use it's a closed group. It's they use the software Slack, and it's a great situation. And you know, I mean, even what we're doing here tonight, as simple as what we're doing here tonight, we literally are, you know, Southwest, West Coast, East Coast, Florida. We, you know, this panel is representing the whole country here tonight, certainly in some form or another. So it's kind of a good thing. So good. Anything else on that higher education one, or does somebody else want to toss one out there? Chief Pernesti, I'm going to pick on you. You got to have some sage advice over there. You're holding out on us.
One of the biggest things I think if I could relate to a chief officer or a shift commander is to think before you speak, or especially before you address your troops. I wish I could have a lot of conversations back as I would address my shift, especially starting out. But it's so important because you can't get those words back. And if you say the wrong thing, they turn you off, and it doesn't matter what you do or what you say. It's going to take a long time to bring them back. So, you know, regardless of your rank, if you're addressing, you know, your subordinates, stand out and think about what you're going to say. It could really bite you if not.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's good advice. I've been the victim of that myself, certainly in a number of cases. You know, trust takes a long time to build. It's destroyed in seconds. It's destroyed in seconds, and it really doesn't come back that easily. So yeah, I think that's great. And I also think that young officers, you know, I'm blessed in a lot of ways, then humbled in a lot of ways. I actually have officers calling me and saying something happened, what should I do? And they're thinking about that, like Joe said, outside of his department. They're calling somebody to not make that mistake. The other thing I would just tell you and caution you, I actually said it a couple of weeks ago in a podcast episode, is be careful with using humor. I'm a guy who uses humor. I'm sort of lighthearted. I'm not ever disrespectful with it, but sometimes the use of humor could be turned and make you appear to be insensitive in a group setting, that it may not come across the way you intended it to come across. So I'm not sure that's a piece of advice, but I would just tell you that sometimes humor can be misinterpreted very easily in some ways. So I think that's important. I think that's an important one. Anything else on the thinking before you speak into your troops? Anything else on that? All right, who's got? Yeah, sure, Kevin.
Chief, I'll just throw one out there, and you and I have actually talked about this, so it won't be news to you, but that whole idea about griping in front of the guys as an officer in particular, I use that scene from Saving Private Ryan a lot, where Tom Hanks, as the captain of the platoon, says, "I don't gripe in front of you. Gripes go up, not down." So that whole kitchen table mob mentality, boy, you got to be careful as an officer what you say. You can't be complaining about the chief. You can't be complaining about a fellow officer in front of the guys. You got to bite your tongue a lot of times, and maybe even have to get up and walk away. So just that idea, gripes go up, they don't go down.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice, Chief. That's a good piece of advice, certainly. And sometimes that's difficult. I can tell you, as a chief officer, I've come back from town hall and gotten pretty beat up, and the troops will know something bad happened. You know what I mean? So it's you can get sucked into that pretty easily without much effort. Lane, what do you got? You got something for us?
Well, yeah, first of all, I definitely have to give 2 thumbs up for that, not griping about the chain of command in front of the troops. And I've actually had to have some conversations with some company officers about them undermining some of their fellow captains. And it's like, look, you want to get together with the captains and talk about that, that's fine. And in fact, we, all the shift battalion chiefs get together periodically and have a separate meeting away from the deputy chiefs, and we'll sit there and what in the hell are they thinking up there on the 4th floor, but I would never have a conversation like that in front of my crews.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But the other thing, as a little advice, and this is something that at a bigger department you can get away with, but maybe that doesn't apply so much to a smaller department, is the advice I've always given is you bid the crew, not the station. And we've got some here in the city, we've got some stations that have, honest to gosh, $1 million views. There's places that people save up their whole life to vacation at. We've got fire stations located right in those spots. But if you're there with the wrong crew, it's misery. On the other hand, we've got some really crappy duty stations with some rough call volumes and some rough types of calls. But if you're there with a great crew, heck, 24 hours goes by like it's the best time of your life. Some of my fondest memories are from some of the crappiest stations in the city. Nice. With a good crew.
Nice. That's well said. In the career department, if you have a bid system like that, not everybody has that, but if you have a bid system, it's people, right? This job is about people, certainly, and I think that's what it's about, certainly. Chief Cagno, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, to go along with that, we talked about this earlier. Famous mentor of both of us told me when I was a very, very young firefighter, very impressionable firefighter. He said there's both winners and losers in this job, or in life in general. And he astute in this business, but he said that stick with the winners and stay away from the losers. But I'm not going to tell you who they are. I want you to identify who they are.
Yeah, nice. That's a very good one. I was going to use one similar, and this is the right time to plug it in. There was a line of duty death. Some people may be aware of this line of duty death many years ago in Boston. It was Steve Minahan, who was lost in a warehouse. Well, at his funeral, the commissioner at the time was eulogizing Steve, and he said something about it, very similar to what you just said, John, and that was, there are givers and there are takers. And he identified Stevie as a giver. And I think we all see that. in the fire service. If it becomes about you, then you probably shouldn't do it. If it's, you know, if you're more important than the mission, then you probably shouldn't be doing what you're doing, because I think that's important. So, you know, the other one that I was given early on, and this is funny, John, because it's the same guy. I know this is hard to believe for everyone watching in the panel, but I had just burned down a building, you know, where I think I dropped it below the foundation. I'm not sure. And it was the most bizarre set of circumstances I had ever been in. An old-fashioned New England hydrant. The port is actually leaded into the hydrant barrel itself. The entire port blew out. Not the threads. The entire port blew out of the hydrant. You couldn't get the closest hydrant. It was a circus act. So anyway, the news media interviews me, and somebody says, you know, what happened? And I said, well, you know, we had a lot of problems with water. We had a water supply problem or whatever. And I got to my office the next morning, and I had this very rude voicemail, but I knew who it was. I knew the voice right away. And the voice said something to this effect. And I passed this out as, you know, words to a chief, but certainly any engineer, any company officer that's listening, pay attention to this one. The comment was, don't let me see you on the 6 o'clock news telling people that you don't know how to do your job. We give you pumpers, we buy you hose. Your job in the fire department is to move water. And you stood up and told somebody you didn't know how to do that. And I'll tell you what, that lesson, as harsh as it may have been when I got the voicemail, I never forgot about that. If you're an engine company guy and you say, I didn't make the hydrant, we couldn't get water on the first line, we blew a line, we did, you know, as much as the debate is on social media, we do a lot of stuff by spraying water. That's what we do. And the advice was, don't stand up and say you don't know how to do your primary mission. So, you know, I was a youngster and didn't know any better, but I think that applies to an engineer or anybody that's in that place. Certainly should be thinking about that one for sure. Chief Hine, what do you got? You got something for us?
Sure, Pete. So the advice that really affected me the most came when I was a new captain, new officer, new to being in charge of incidents. It was just this silly little wording that came out, and mentor pulled me aside and said, hey, stop calling yourself IC on the incident. An IC is just a frozen treat that's soft and good to drink, doesn't do anything for you. He said, make yourself command. Ever since then, every time I'm on an incident, I say, Hein has command, this is Maslow command. I don't think necessarily the word is what's making the change in my mentality when I'm running an incident, but going through there and knowing, hey, I'm command, I'm in charge. I'm going to be firm, I'm going to be clear, and I'm going to make my orders known. And just that simple word of advice really did change and make me more effective with leadership on a fire ground.
Yeah, no, that's nice. I mean, that's a simple little tip. It's kind of a great little tip for sure. I learned something early on. You know, I hate that we use the word assume command. I've assumed command a couple times, and the fire didn't give it up. The fire was still in charge. Ultimately, the fire he didn't acknowledge my command at all. So it didn't work out. But that's a good one, Chief. I like that one. John, what do you got? John, you're muted. I think you're still muted, John.
There you go, Pete. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Do everything as if you were going to sign your name to it, and you're only as effective as your last job.
Yeah, you got two there. Do everything as if you were going to sign your name to it. That's an important one. When it's a late run, you don't want to do the report. When you're doing something, do you want to see it? Do you want to see it on the 6 o'clock news tonight with your name underneath it? You know, that's a good one. And the second part of that was, John?
And you're only as effective as your last job, whatever that was. So, you know, you're going to make a statement by signing your name to it. You better be able to back it up each time.
Yeah.
Be consistent.
Yeah, no, very good. Very good. Any comments about that from the panel? Anybody got anything on that? I think only as good as your last performance. That's what people are going to remember, certainly. Joe, Chief Pernesti put in there. When you're in command, act like you've been there before. That's good. You want to expand on that, Joe?
Yeah, I'll agree with Chief Cagno, but I'll also say that if you mess up, admit it in front of your. I'm talking in front of your troops. If you make a mistake during a fire fight and you critique, stand up and own up to that mistake. One of the things that has helped me is when I messed up on the fire ground at the critique, I'll be the first one to admit that, you know what, this didn't go, that's my fault, and own up to it. And even own up to other things go wrong. I've seen a lot of command officers point the finger. You know what? You're ultimately responsible. And, and so it's kind of like a coach that's in a press conference say, I'm responsible, I'm responsible, I'm responsible. Same thing. If you're in command, if your officers aren't doing something, it's ultimately your responsibility because you probably failed them before the bell rang. And that's hard to get across to new command officers.
No, I think that's well said, Joe. Certainly well said. Kevin.
Chief, just to add on to what Chief Pernesti said, I agree wholeheartedly. The only wrinkle I would add, own up to it, and then shut up about it. I've had guys that repeat their mistake and talking about their mistake. Oh, you guys will never trust me because I blew that fire on Main Street. Talk about it again and again and again. And it just, really ruins their command presence. So yes, stand up in front of your guys, own it, and then forget about it. Don't talk about it again. Again, that outside mentor chief, call me, if you need to unburden yourself, but own your mistake and then, and learn from it, then forget about it and move on. Don't keep rehashing it with the men.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, you know what? I hadn't really thought about that, Kevin, but I've actually seen that. Now that you say that, I can think of some people that fit in that category, that certainly have done that. That's a great one. That's a great one. Warren, what do you got?
Well, one I've passed on to the guys that have worked with me is to read, and read a lot, and read a wide variety of stuff, just not fire service journals or things like that. Look at other professions, look at leadership texts, biographies of famous leaders like Chesty Puller or somebody like that, Harry Truman. My guys used to get a kick out of it because in the station I'd give them book reports assignments, which they'd have to go read, then come back and do a presentation on it for us. And at the time they didn't like it, but I've had good feedback over the years that really helped them a lot.
Yeah, nice, good, solid advice. Hey, from the chat room, let's reach out. Nice to see Chief Blackley is in the chat room. Chief Blackley from Wilmington, and he says, here's a little advice. Don't get locked into operations for your entire career. If the opportunity presents itself, go to training division, the marshal's office, and what have you. You will get a new perspective of the operation of your department, and you'll look at things from a different angle. And I think that's wise advice. I had a great shift commander, a good fire officer, whatever, and kind of sent him down the fire prevention path for a couple of years. And he said horrible things about my mother, my family, and he was all over me about that. And then after like 3 or 4 years in the division, he's now the deputy chief of the fire department, and that experience helped him considerably by getting another look. So thank you, Frank. I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing that. And Warren, you're right. Read everything. There's a lot of folks will read mags, they'll read online stuff, they'll do whatever, but it's fire service related. I think you're exactly right. If you read a military person's biography, it's, leadership is leadership, and we get kind of overwhelmed with leadership. If you just got promoted to the shift captain on B shift, I prefer that you didn't act like General Patton. However, there may be some nuggets of advice that you could glean from his biography, I'm sure. So that's that. Joe DeVito, you've been quiet. You got to have some advice over there. What do you got?
Yeah, this is actually pretty recent as well. It's kind of nice to have such a broad spectrum of experience. Like I said, I'm a new captain, and recently I was just made aware that I should care about everything that goes on, but I should only focus on what's on my span of control. Now, I'm going to give you a little Pete Lamb plug here, like your what's important now type of situation that we just went over. It's totally true. My problem is that I cared about everything. I think I'm over passionate. I want to fix everything. Every problem that's out there, I think I could fix. And finally, it started affecting me and my crew. And they said, hey, listen, just focus on what you can control. Focus on your house, on your crew, and let the other stuff fall into place. It's good to care, but take care of what's in your command.
Yeah, very, very well said. I had a guy, in fact, I just used this line when we went off the air last week. I actually used this line on the panel. We were off record. And I had a guy who used to sit at the kitchen table and he'd listen to all of these pronouncements. And his comment was, you guys are trying to build a spaceship to Mars. We don't have the parts, we don't have the equipment or the checking account. You're building a spaceship here. Why don't we just focus on what we can do today? And it really is a true statement. But you only said one thing wrong that I'd like to coach you on, Joe. Only one thing you said wrong in your whole statement. There's no such thing about being overpassionate. You know what? Keep that passion. Keep it strong. Put a little bit in your gas tank because someday you're going to need it in your career. Save it. You can put it in reserve. John.
I was going to kind of say something along the same lines. What you're doing, Joe, is you're being the Spock. I understand what the members are saying as far as, just worry about what you can control. But, that's what we need. We need more people to be Spocks. And what I mean by that is, being an influencer, bringing more positive thinking to the job rather than the negative and the cynicism that goes around. So if you're out there and you're being the Spock, the person that's trying to light things up, there's nothing wrong with that, especially as a company officer. Certainly you have to do it within your span of control or else you get overwhelmed, but there's nothing wrong with being passionate and being a Spock.
Yeah, I think the worst thing, the feedback, the downside of being the Spark and being quote unquote over passionate is we beat ourselves up. You will just self-destruct. And I think that, when you get in the fire service, I have a list of unfinished projects of stuff that didn't get done. And there are things you have to let go of. You have to achieve what you can achieve, and you're not going to be able to do them all. So I think that that's important. But there's an interesting thing going on in the chat, and I'll just bring it up. I'm going to call on Joe Pernesti in a minute, and I'm going to go back to you too, Joe DeVito, for a second. But we always say, I can only control my platoon, my shift, my group, whatever it is. I can only control that. And that may be true, as long as somewhere in the back of your head, you do understand you're all on the same department. Because I just came out of a 3-platoon system with 2 stations. And so everybody said, there's like 6 different fire departments. I said, no, there's actually 7, because what I think is going on is probably the 7th one. There's probably a 7th one. So as long as you take care of your own, I think that's good. But as long as you realize that we're all on the same plane ride together, you got to have that. Well, I'm not going to talk to Johnny. He's got a bad attitude, and I'm not going to talk to him because he's on a different shift. He's only here tonight on overtime. You're still part of a department. Chief Pernesti.
Yes, but and like I put in the chat room, it's one of the biggest things that my dad told me when I started on the job. He was on the job for 30 years in the same department. His thought process was that we look over the fence and worry about a person, maybe it's a personnel issue on another shift, or that captain makes them wash the trucks this way or whatever, and it may not be written down, it may not be a policy, and that becomes very good banter at the kitchen table on your shift. As I get older on the job, nothing drives me more crazy than worrying about what another shift is doing. When I'm non-policy related things. If the chief says you're going to lay a line and do a dance, okay, we're all going to lay a line and do a dance. Little things. We waste too much time moaning and groaning about the little things. And I tell my guys, don't stop looking over the fence. Stop worrying about it. I think there's a happy medium between like what you're saying, Chief, because we've all functioned in those many fire departments scenarios, but the younger guys worry too much about what's going on around them. They don't focus on their own shift. It's almost like deflecting too.
Yeah, no, I think it ties right back with what Joe said earlier, is that, focus on what you can control. And if all you can actually control is that, I just like to put out there, remember that the other groups are a part of your organization at some point. Lane, you've been quiet for a couple minutes. Let's hear from Lane.
Well, yeah, it's funny, along those same lines, I got some advice, from the book Don Quixote is, don't go tilting at windmills. So yeah, it's the same thing. You can have these grandiose ideas, and I get a lot of that. When the last couple of years I was working with our rescue companies, and those, of course, the guys on the rescue companies are the type A personalities, very motivated guys. They were constantly chasing after the latest and greatest idea, and I had to be the voice of reason and keep everything within budget and things like that. So it's easy to, come off as the bad guy in those situations. But, for the guys that are actually out on the rescue rigs, those are a passionate group of people, and they're good at what they do, and it's that passion that causes that excellence. But occasionally they need somebody to put the brakes on them.
Yeah, well, that, and that's a good, while we're in that, I'll segue into that. As the chief of department, or the higher you go in the chain of command, the toughest job you have is pulling in the reins. You might actually agree and say, that's a great idea, we got to do it. You don't have the funding, you don't have the support, you don't have the resources, you don't, you're not able to do that. And I've wrestled and made myself sick over decisions that we just didn't have the resources to do. And it becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge. We got some stuff in the chat room. I can't follow it. Warren, you got something? You got something?
Well, one of the things I did, as you get up in rank, stress is supposed to become, more of a constant. And some of the guys thought I was kidding, but if they came into the office with a problem, I asked them two questions. One, was anybody injured or killed? The answer was no. All right, well, I'm not stressed yet. Did it cost me, or will it cost me more than $1 million? Again, if that answer was no, I didn't really care.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you gotta, it's chief officer triage. That's what you're doing. It's chief officer triage. Absolutely. That's what you're doing. That's what you ought to be doing. No question. Chief Burns.
Chief, I'm going to put you on the spot. I hope you're prepared to discuss this, because it's a gem. It's something you taught me and someone taught you. Probably Chief Cagno can jump in too, because he probably heard the same thing. There is nothing so unequal as the equal treatment of unequals. And I wish you'd take a couple minutes and expand on that, because that's great advice, especially for a company officer.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It was advice that was given to me a long time ago, and you got to really say that a couple of times, right? You get, when you read that phrase, I think it's an ancient Greek phrase or whatever, but I got it, and we should say the name. The poor guy's deceased, but he was a deputy chief in the Randolph Fire Department. Paul Anderson was just a fine, fine man, and really one of my mentors. He's since passed away. And so how did we get in trouble with that? And so here's what we do. Here's how you get in trouble. Somewhere in a management book, it said, treat everyone the same. Then it said, treat everyone equal. And then somewhere along the line, what we really should be doing is, and I'll phrase this very carefully, is treat everyone fairly under the same set of circumstances. Are there folks in your organization that you could make a joke with? Yes. Is there another group of folks in your organization that you cannot make a joke with because it's perceived? Everyone in your organization, you got a 100 person organization, 100 firefighters in an organization. That's got to be like 160 personalities right there. 100 members and 160 personalities. What you need to do is be consistent and under the same set of circumstances, treat people the same, because not every person is equal. You have shift relief people that come in an hour before the shift. And then you have the bell ringers that show up exactly when the bell hits. Are those people the same? Well, they're firefighters and they're firefighter 1, 2, and they're whatever. Yeah, okay, they are the same. But in organizational, they have a different, they are different in and of themselves. And I think that if we recognize people's differences and still treat them fairly, and I've gotten burned by that. I don't think the statute of limitations is out on this incident, so I can't tell the story which burned me the most. But it was a very complicated story where somebody said, if you do that for that person, we're going to have to do it for everyone. And that was just not the case. And we're in a society today, and we've got a workforce today that does believe everybody gets a trophy. And, I'm not going to go down that path, but that clearly is going on. And you have to be careful with that phrase. But thank you for bringing that up, Kevin, because it is something that we should keep in mind as we're going through the day. And as you're taking a personnel audit, right? If you had the books audited, you'd figure out what your positives, your negatives, your balances, your receivables, all of those things. We should be taking a personnel audit every day and figuring out the strengths, weaknesses, and where we are with our personnel. Chief Pernesti.
I wanted to ask the panel and you, Chief, one of the things I wrestle with is when someone says you have different rules for different people, is that good or bad? And I kind of related to what you were saying, that you have to treat everybody, differently. I try to maintain the same, rules as far as safety. But is it okay to give leeway to your better performers than it would be to those that, the givers and the takers? I stress about that sometimes, that, I'm not talking major rules or safety, but leeway on certain things. This officer didn't do a report right away, but he's one top-notch officer. Whereas I got a real slacker who, he's doing it because he's a slacker. How do I handle those kind of situations? And I'm sure a lot of officers deal with that. Just curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I'm gonna save that for the end. I'll be the last guy to answer. Chief Cagno, you want to jump in? Let's get some feedback for Joe on that one. But John, you want to jump in there?
Well, first of all, to go back to what Chief Burns was saying, I agree. We can't alienate people. That's probably the worst thing we can do in the fire service and any organization. But to answer Chief Bernesti's question, I understand the predicament. The problem is, as soon as you do that once, it extrapolates. It becomes a bigger problem, manifests, and then somebody sees that a totally different way. You know, the guy that's doing it right every time, and he makes the slightest mistake, we still need to hold him to the same standard as the guy that's doing it wrong every day. I know what you mean in principle. You know, there's the ethical end of that, and then there's the moral end of that. You know, that can bite you.
Yeah, fair enough. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Warren, you want to put some wisdom on that?
Yeah, when this thing comes off mute, I think your word fair is the way you address all of that. You have to be consistent. It has to be fair across the board. And, you know, you have guys that have strengths and weaknesses. You identify those, you work on them. But if you start making different rules for different players, that's when you get in trouble. And your friendly EEO officer will probably come to visit. Well, actually, you'll go visit them.
Yeah, good point, Warren. You know, in the career department, even in a volunteer on-call department, you could get bit with, labor situations. Certainly, I think the issue is the perception. Somebody put something in the chat room, and somebody go back and give it to me at some point. But you know, you're an officer or a supervisor, whatever you are. I don't think I can say supervisor anymore. I got yelled at for that. It's politically incorrect. In our paramilitary organization, we can't say that somebody's in charge. But the point is, you have 2 eyes watching a crew. The crew has 24 eyes watching you. And so that, as Chief Cagno said, I think in spirit, Chief Pernesti, I agree with you, but I think the way that is perceived by the rest of the organization is it could blow up. It could blow up. And worse than that, if you were attempting to hide that, you know, special privilege you gave, if it appeared that you were being deceitful in some way, you're sitting on a landmine. In my case, we used to call that a lamb mind, but that's different. I digress. But who was that? John, I saw, wants to chime in.
Yeah, the way I used to handle that was I would go to the guy that was always consistent, that slipped, and I would just say, you know, you're better than that. You know, what happened? You're better than that. You know, I don't expect that from you. I expect it from the other individual. That's why he's always getting reprimanded, but I don't expect that from you. But that's the way I handle that. And I know what he means, and we've all done it. I've been on the other side of that.
Yeah. Chief Hine, you've been quiet for a few minutes. What do you got for us? You got advice for us?
Well, thing I've been thinking about is came to mind a battalion chief that I had for a good 8 years here before being promoted. His greatest joy was to ride in the back of the truck and make me or somebody act higher than the position they're at on a scene. The chief himself, one of his biggest statements to me is, my job is to give you more and more tasks until you can't complete them, until you can't successfully do them. Just being able to find those people that stand out, challenge, and push up and act up, I think is a great way to handle that.
Great piece of advice. We're very nervous about that in the fire service. I say this, and people call me names, you know, similar to what's on a cactus or something. And this is a family show, but people talk bad about me. But the fact is, what you want to do is you want to test to failure. In a non-emergency situation, you want to test till failure, and then you figure out weak spots, and you actually challenge people. I think some of the best things that happened to me, Chief, I couldn't agree more, was I was put in a situation, rightfully, wrongfully, and had to perform a task, and I took every one of those lessons with me. I'll just interject another piece of advice. I've learned more from making mistakes and failing than I have from doing things right. If you're doing it right, you do it. You make that mistake, you're never going to make that mistake again. Hopefully not. Usually around time 3 or 4, I correct myself, but you try you try not to make that mistake. But testing to failure is a valid technique. Lane, what do you got?
Yeah, that's, you raise a really good point about the tough testing environment. Obviously you never want to get anybody hurt or worse yet, killed in a training environment, but there are those times when we've been able to create that super realistic training and really push people to their limits, with a safety net. Where they've done that personally in the last few years to me and some of my cohorts is in simulations. We'll do, because of the wildland fire environment we have here, we set up these full-scale exercises, and they give us input at the back of the Suburban, and we're running the call. And I've sweated it out way more in those exercises, way more than I ever have on a real incident. And yeah, you learn. They keep throwing it to you until you do fail, and then break down from there. So those have been very valuable learning environments.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I can't imagine. We talk about stuff, running those large scale wildland situations. I mean, that's a whole nother world. I have all the respect in the world for you guys doing that, because, I don't have that set of experience, and the challenges that come with that certainly are greater. I'm really good at hurricanes and stuff, but I'm not so good at wildland interface kind of things. So that's that. Chief Burns, another piece of advice, something you were given or something you'd like to give out or talk about.
So, Chief, how about, especially as a command officer or a company officer, to take the job seriously, but not take yourself too seriously? Be careful, check your ego. There are guys on your shift that know things that you don't know. Take the input. But that whole idea, I think, is good. To take the job seriously, but be careful about taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah, well said, Chief. I got some hate mail. I put a blog post up yesterday, and there was a punchline in the blog post that said, don't believe everything on your resume. I know the author. So, you're right there. If you've surrounded yourself with good people on your shift and what have you, you do have people on that fire ground that are as sharp as you or have watched you closely. And quite frankly, if your folks perform pretty well, that's a testament to you. That means you've done your job. I saw something in the chat room about training your replacement. That's what this is about, is to make sure you're training your replacement. Chief Cagno.
Yeah, tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear.
There's a piece of advice. Tell them what they need to hear and not what they want to hear. That's good for another reason, because it cuts down on the Christmas cards you have to send out at the end of the year too. You cut down on the card list a little bit when you do that, but it certainly is that. And the worst thing you can do is work for a boss that tells you that everything's sunshine and roses. I'd rather work for somebody that's telling me we got some challenges, gives me real life expectations or what have you. I think that's important. Joe DeVito.
Yeah, just to add on that topic, it's very difficult, especially when you're a new, I'm going to say a new engine boss, to work with the crews to supervise the crews who you are now, used to work with. So it's really hard to kind of make that adjustment to tell them what they need to know. And that's where you really need to look into yourself and see, hey, is this something that I'm able to do? And is this, try to find out a way to do it, I guess, not to say politically correct, but do it where he never talks to you again, like you said earlier, get off his Christmas card list. So that's a tough chore as an officer.
Yeah, well, and let me give you the classic firehouse phrase. You know what, Cap? You forgot where you came from, right?
Yes.
Is the phrase that matches that problem, is you forgot where you came from. Well, the fact is, you're in a new role. You're in a new assignment. you've got a new set of rules. And there was something, I think Chief Whitley had said something about, going out there and doing the chores when you're an engine officer or whatever, doing the chores. And there was a great social media exchange a couple of weeks ago that I did not get involved in. I've realized that it takes multiple people to fight, and if I don't engage, I'm a lot better off. But the discussion was, the guy's a brand new officer, and we don't have to listen to him until he proves himself to us. Boy, I got to tell you, I gotta drink some My Lantern on that one. I got a little heartburn on that one. The guy or the gal is an officer. They're an officer today. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be nice if they were out there washing the truck today. I understand, but they're probably brushing up on SOPs, other things, or what have you. And I think I'm not absolutely against that. And I've certainly done that enough times. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't want to confuse the issue. But the thing that I was reading was, I don't have to respect the brand new officer until he proves himself to me. I don't think that's exactly the way it works in Pete's world. I don't know. Maybe it does in somebody else's world, but I'm not really comfortable with that. Chief Whitley. Muted, Warren.
Okay. I was going to say that attitude does not, well, it does exist, but is not tolerated at all in the military. If you get promoted and you're the man over whoever you were just working with, well, you're the man now, or woman, but, generically.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because, but there's this whole thing, like, we've taken what we're doing to a different level. My favorite analogy is, listen, I went to work at UPS, and, they were angry with me because I said, listen, I'm not wearing those brown uniforms. Well, you know what? You're going to work at UPS, you're going to wear a brown uniform. That's the way it works, kid. That's how it works. And I think that we do need to, we went from hazing and pounding on recruits to now to a position where I think the pendulum has gone so far the other way that, we, in one sentence, we are a paramilitary organization, except on Tuesday afternoons when it's windy or raining, and then we don't want to be, because we'll have some other rule that applies there. So I think we have to be cautious about that. I think I just said one of the other pieces of advice, and that is consistency. Right? We talked a little bit about that. Doesn't, whatever you are, be consistent. You don't want people to wonder which boss came to work today. I mean, we've all had bad days, and people will tell you when you're having a bad day. Your crew knows that better than anybody. But consistency, I think, is one of the things that will make this organization work in a positive manner. Warren?
My crews knew to keep me fed, because if I got hungry, it was awful.
Right. It's like the best word that I've heard. That's one of those new slang words, hangry. Right?
Oh,
I'm hangry.
I'm the epitome of hangry. They kept emergency candy bars around.
Right. Cap, go have a Snickers bar. You're beating up the crew. Yeah. I like it. All right. Why don't we begin to think about, we got a few minutes left. Let's begin to say, so we've had some active viewers during the show, and we'll certainly have more viewers as this thing sits up there on the web pages and what have you. Let's go through a cycle of what advice do you want to give someone who has watched this show? We have just punched out a ton of them. I'm going to rewatch this video and actually jot notes, unless Joe, unless you did that. I mean, we punched out a bunch of pieces of advice here that are really pretty cool. So who wants to start with going through the summary section? And this will be your last word as we go out with the advice we'd like to give somebody else who's a fire service. And it doesn't matter what rank. Could be a young firefighter watching, could be a company officer, chief officer. It really doesn't matter. Lane, go ahead. Start us off.
Well, I'd like to say I coined this myself, but I'm going to have to give credit to a former fire chief of ours who's now the chief of Orange County Fire Authority, Jeff Bowman. He always had a statement of, his priorities were, faith, family, friends, and fire department, the 4 Fs as he referred to it. And, my advice to somebody coming into the job, I would say love the fire department and, put in that extra effort. I know we all do that. But do not neglect your family and your loved ones and the rest of your life. You're only here for a certain period of time, and the fire department's going to move on without you, and you sure as heck want to leave it better than you found it. But I've seen too many guys that just they volunteer at the fire department, they do extra effort, they go that extra mile, and it's great for the job. But please don't do that to the detriment of your family or your loved ones.
Great. Sound advice, Lane. That's perfect. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for. Who'd like to jump up to the plate? Chief Hine, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. And I think that I think what I have to say is going to couple great with that. And as I told you, I wanted to do this through a screen share. So I'm going to pull that up right now. Hopefully that works out. As that goes in, should be screen sharing it right now. This is a picture very personal to me. This came from the Tony Bacon Memorial. Tony Bacon is obviously the gentleman pictured there. He was one of the forefathers of MPS Structural Fire who passed away from cancer. Behind him in the ball cap is Matt Werner, who was my closest mentor. About a year and a half ago, he took his own life from various reasons. And what I have to say is take care of yourself and take care of others. Take a look at what the Fire Smoke Coalition is doing as far as cancer prevention, and take a look at the Firefighter Behavioral Health Association, ffbha.org. Well, those have great resources to help you take care of yourself, take care of others, and just keep it family.
Excellent, Chief. Excellent. Well done. Well done. Nicely done. Chief Pernesti, what do you want to tell people?
Well, I guess my thing is to be a sponge, and I totally agree with the faith, family, and I totally get it in the job. You have to have balance. But that said, if you're a new firefighter or whatever rank you are in, 1 hour every day of your career, whether you're on duty or off, on the fire service, you would be so much better. Reading something, studying, something, learning something. So that's my advice, is to be that sponge and give the fire service 1 hour every day, if you're on duty or not.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. Chief Cagno.
Yeah, I wrote something down. It's a privilege and an honor to serve in the fire service today, and I think we need to understand that we have to conduct ourselves to our highest standard. We have to have a strong moral character both on and off the job all the time. We took an oath, and with that oath comes enormous responsibility and commitment to serve in a selfless manner. So as you forge through your career, you can never forget that oath. You have to understand that it was laid by people many years ago, hundreds of years ago, and that we have to follow what they created. It's just a long-standing pattern of consistency and to not disrupt it.
Excellent. Excellent. Chief Burns, what do you got as a parting shot?
Chief, how about something from one of those old philosophers? I think it might have been Plato. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. So just some human decency will go a long way, I think, sometimes at the firehouse.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Sometimes we, as tight as we are, we can be sort of merciless in many cases and give ourselves some grief there. Chief Whitley, what do you got for us as a parting shot?
I won't tell you what Laura just said. It might not be politically correct, but yes, my parting shot is never stop learning. Listen and observe the people around you, and you'll get nuggets if you just pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. Pay attention. It doesn't really cost anything, right? And Joe DeVito, have I heard? No, I need a summary statement from you, Joe.
Mine's pretty easy. It's just remember why we're here. All right. It's not the pay or the benefits. It's not the politics. It's not the position or the status that you want. We're here for the people in the street. And I think people seem to forget that a lot. You could treat them like a queen or a king and not do anything for them medically, or just as easy as changing a smoke detector, and you'll get a file about how great of a firefighter you are. But you could actually save their life and treat them like crap personally, and get a letter in your file saying what kind of horrible person you were. So remember that those are the people that we serve, and that's why we got into this line of work. And don't let the other stuff blind you from that.
Excellent, excellent. Well said, Joe. Well said. And mine is similar to what Chief Cagno said in this regard. I'm kind of a history sort of guy, and many of you have heard me talk about the Maltese Cross. We're all wearing the Maltese Cross, and that was a symbol for hundreds and thousands of years of people who wanted to help others who were hurt and threatened by fire. And I think when you put that Maltese Cross on, I think we need to understand that there are everything we do with that T-shirt on at the fire conference, in the bar, wherever we happen to be, we're representing thousands and thousands of people that went before us. And I think that that's a big deal. So great panel tonight. Thank you all. I'll ask everybody to stay with us, and we'll be here next week, next Sunday at 8 p.m. The panel is always a composite. It's who's available, who's able to come. So we appreciate everyone who stayed with us, and those that'll watch this on a later date. So let's wrap it up right here.